Hi everyone, welcome to week 12. Today we're talking about chapter 3, digital gaming and the media playground. As usual, if you should have already skimmed the chapter before coming to this lecture, so it'll make more sense to you. And so for this chapter, we're going to focus on gaming and gamification. We'll look at the early history of electronic gaming, its roots in penny arcades and mechanical gaming, the evolution of electronic gaming. We'll talk about social media. We'll talk about gaming as a social medium that forms communities of play, analyze the economics of gaming, including the industry's major players and various revenue streams, and its production as well, and raise some questions about the role of digital gaming in democratic society. And finally, I've added a small section that isn't in your book chapters. It might be interesting for you to take notes. We're going to look a little bit at gamification, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and their various impacts and how they relate to gaming. So the first challenge in thinking about video games is to even understand what it is that a video game is. Is it an activity? Is it content? Is it a kind of platform? And this varies from one kind of game to another. And we see differences in arcade-style games to home consoles and portable players, PC games. And then once the internet is introduced, the changes to internet gaming and RPGs, and augmented and virtual reality, as well as spectator sports like Twitch and esports. So our book mentions some of the early foundations in society and culture that set the stage for digital gaming. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution that began in the 19th century created a context where mass consumption was promoted and people were buying more things, and it became more of their everyday life to do. The notion of leisure time was also something that was solidifying during the same period due to the development of labor unions and the work that they did to win an 8-hour day and a 40-hour week and weekends. So this meant that people, for the first time, who were not wealthy, had this concept of a separation between their work life and time for them to relax. So in this context, games became a popular way to fill this new kind of concept of leisure time. And we see notions of games in the arcade when it first evolved into four major formats for television, handheld devices, computers, and the internet. Mechanical games are one of the earliest links to digital gaming systems and were a wildly popular form of entertainment, mostly played in arcades, coin-operated countertop machines that first appeared in places like train depots, hotel lobbies, bars, and restaurants, places where people often found themselves with waiting time or leisure time. Later, popular penny arcades helped to shape the future media technology with the kinds of entertainment that they offered. So in relation to games, for instance, penny arcades had a popular machine called the Bagatelle, which was an early version of a pinball game. Arcade games were popular not just as places to go to play games, but also social spaces to interact with other people. So even early on, gaming was seen as a space for social activity. Oh, wait, okay. People. Atari may be the most popular and well-known of these early home video game systems and was released in the 1970s. Some of the most popular games were Pong, Donkey Kong, pictured here as Pac-Man. Some key innovations on the Atari machine and in Pong was that they kept score on the screens for players, which would be recorded, so when you left and came back, you would be able to see your score and basically play against other players even when you weren't there. You could compete to be the highest score. And this incorporated also sounds that corresponded to gameplay, and so the device would make like a blip noise when the ball hit the paddles or bounced off the sides of the court. With Atari, we see early brand deals related to games, with the home version marketed through an exclusive deal at the time with Sears. And Pong was also popular outside of the home in arcades. So it became the first video game that was popular in arcades, and also the first video game that sort of transcended the boundary between the home and the arcade. From the late 1970s to the early 1980s, we see many of the kind of classic video games like Asteroids, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong appear in arcades and in bars. The popularity of these games drew large crowds to arcades and signaled electronic gaming's potential as a social medium. In this period, the game Pac-Man was developed and was significant as the first video game to feature an avatar that represented the player within the game. So previously it had been like objects that represented the player within the game, but Pac-Man was the first where there was actually a figure that represented you. You were Pac-Man going around eating all of the little ghosts. The idea of a console or devices specifically used to play video games started to be used to describe video game systems in this period as well. Within consoles, we started to see a higher bit rating and more sophisticated graphics. And some of the early consoles, or the Atari, would be like the Atari 2600, developed in 1977. Nintendo Entertainment System developed its first game in 1983, and Sega Genesis developed its first one in 1989. Major home console makers still today include Nintendo with devices like Wii, Microsoft with Xbox and Kinect, and Sony with their PlayStation series. Games have intersected with consoles in many different ways, sometimes being made available across consoles and sometimes remaining exclusive to one brand or one console. In order to play a different game, you would need to purchase a separate console for it. Certain kinds of games that you could only play within that one brand, right? As we saw the rise in popularity of home computers, we also started to see gaming emerge on home computers. And the advantages of computers over early consoles was that they had greater versatility, faster processing speeds, better graphics, and often there were games that were free to play, but there were also subscription games. And with the advent of the internet, we start seeing the birth of social media games. So the combination of the internet with gaming went on to further transform gaming on computers and consoles both, and online connections are now a very normal part of gaming and essential at this point. The internet made live online multiplayer play possible and enabled the spread of video games to converge devices and paved the way for social gaming in virtual worlds. So today, gaming consoles have become entertainment centers where multiple forms of media converge in a single device. Most gaming consoles allow you to access other kinds of content besides games and also to communicate with people. Beyond the console, an important innovation in gaming has been portable players and mobile gaming devices and forms of gaming that have developed around them. Nintendo's Game Boy is one of the earliest and most popular mobile gaming devices. It was originally in black and white. I played on one of these when I was young and have evolved into more interactive Nintendo Switches that we see on the market today. Portable devices are facing a lot of competition, though, from smartphones and other kinds of touchscreen devices like tablets, as many people find it's more convenient to play some games on their phone instead of having to have a separate dedicated device. So this kind of mirrors the tension between gaming consoles and computers, and we see the same kind of thing playing out with mobile devices around other kinds of technology, as we've talked about in the past. The internet and mobile gaming also allows for advances in virtual reality technology that can be incorporated into games. In 2014, for example, Facebook, or now we call it Meta, bought the virtual reality company Oculus VR, which promises a total immersion into a 3D world through their technology. This technology is increasingly being incorporated into games produced by social media companies like Facebook, but also other companies to provide more realistic and interactive experiences for players. We see this a lot with Nintendo Wii, where you can use the controller motions with your body, and that's more interactive and more of an experience. So more games are trying to use that in their systems. One popular form of digital gaming is massive multiplayer online role-playing games, or MMORPGs. These games are set in virtual worlds and allow large numbers of groups of players to play at once. Online fantasy sports games are also a widely popular genre, especially on social networking sites. And there are many genres of video games, so action games, shooter games, adventure games, role-playing games, study and simulation games, casual games, and a category of themed games like sports, music, and dance games. So action and shooter games make up, of course, as you can see here, the majority of the market today in terms of game sales, subscriptions, and player accounts. All video games are regulated and categorized by the Electronic Software Association, or the ESA, which organizes these games by types of gameplay on the screen here that you see. Gaming is something that we can do individually, sure, but there are also many ways we see community intersect with gaming today, just as it did in the past. So inside many games, there are forms of group play like pickup games, guilds, or clans, games that allow groups to play into communities through voice and text within the game. To one another, giving these games a very social aspect. There are also many places and ways that we can access these games as well, including pay models. So your game stores and forms of digital distribution are all currently used on the market today, with more and more games becoming digitally accessible for purchase and download. And many of these games add to the social aspect of gaming as well, because they're more accessible to a greater number of people to download on their phones or mobile devices or on computers in order to connect with people. Outside of the games themselves, there are also many communities centered around gaming as an activity. So these groups often create collective intelligence events, places where gamers can share knowledge and ideas with one another. Modding, for example, is a popular topic of discussion where players discuss how to alter the gaming devices or games themselves to achieve different kinds of gameplay. Game sites like GameStop.com and PennyArcade.com are also places where players come together as well as dedicated social groups, as well as on social sites like Reddit, where often you'll find spaces for people to share tricks and tips or modding adjustments, etc. There's also many gaming conventions that support gaming communities, like Penny Arcade Expo, BizCon, and the Tokyo Game Show, and E3. Digital gaming has impacted media culture, of course, beyond the gaming industry. For example, fantasy sports leagues have spawned a number of draft specials on ESPN, on a regular podcast on ESPN Radio. We see games being turned into movies, and video game spin-offs are common for blockbusters and in the other direction. And comic books and animation have also inspired many video games, and sometimes in the other direction as well. Finally, gaming itself has become a highly popular competitive activity with the rise of esports and spectatorship of sports through things like Twitch. A multiplayer video game can be played competitively for spectators, typically professional gamers. Spectators can either be in a live audience or they might be part of an internet audiences. And they're played much like an athletic event and follow certain rules. There's a referee that officiates the game. There are sportscasters whose profession is to comment on the game, explaining what's happening in real time. And esports, following this trajectory of traditional sports, colleges and universities have actually begun recruiting and offering scholarships to esport athletes that are often underwritten by major big media contracts. The first video game there's some history to this. So the first video game tournament was held in 1972, and developed leagues and tournaments grew in the 1990s. The first 24-hour cable gaming channel was developed in South Korea in 2014. Robert Morris University was the first U.S. university to offer a college scholarship to esports athletes. And esports can now be like a medal event even in the 2022 Asian Games, which is the world's largest multi-sport event except for the Olympics. And all of this is even further developed by
streaming has become one of the most popular forms of online entertainment today. Sites like Twitch, YouTube, and Mixer are capitalizing on a trend of live streaming and merging another form of media, video games. The video game industry was a $138 billion market in 2018, and there's one live streaming platform that is beating out the competition for live streaming gaming, Twitch.
Views for that either online or on TV. Twitch alone gets that every single tournament. It's hundreds of millions of people. It's very global. It's every single tournament is highly viewed. So that scale is absolutely staggering, and it's only going up.
The site has over 3 million monthly streamers, and at one point, Twitch generated so much hype that both Google and Amazon were trying to acquire the site. Twitch is one of the biggest live streaming platforms. It's viewed as a top choice for many content creators looking to build a following.
So being live every single day, I was able to build connections with people on a much more personal level and at a faster pace than I did with other platforms.
I first started streaming beginning of high school, so that was around 6-7 years ago. Twitch wasn't even big back then. They had a couple thousand viewers maybe, the top streamers, and I was like, wow, people like watching them play games, they chat about it, so I started streaming.
In 2018, Twitch had the 6th highest traffic for streamed video in the world, and in January of 2019, Twitch had nearly 1 billion hours of streams watched on the site. But before Twitch took the internet by storm, launching the careers of streamers like Tyler Ninja Blevins, the site went by a different name, Justin TV. Justin TV was launched back in 2007, and it was developed by Justin Kan and Emmett Shear. In its earliest days, it was a site dedicated to broadcasting the life of the site's creator, Justin Kan.
The community that formed around Justin TV was a little bit more of a reality television show community, as you'd expect. So it was people who were attracted by the idea. There's probably about 10,000 people in the core Justin TV community originally who really wanted to be part of this sort of social experiment to share Justin's life on the internet. And it attracted a really eclectic group of people. We still are in contact with a lot of them. It was a really interesting time.
Justin TV had a huge following and saw gamers like Ninja using the platform broadcasting their gaming in real time. The live streaming service would eventually pivot to set sights on the gaming and esports community. In June 2011, Twitch was announced from the same creators as Justin TV, and a few years later, Justin TV shut down. During its first year, Twitch had close to 3.2 million unique visitors a month, but the company would rapidly grow into the giant that it is today. In 2012, monthly visitors jumped from 3.2 million to 20 million visitors. And in 2013, Twitch would become the #1 video streaming site in the video game category with 45 million visits a month.
So when we got started on Twitch, we had a goal of 25% growth a month every month. At the end of 6 months, if we could keep our growth above 25% a month for gaming content, we would commit. And if we couldn't, we would kill the project. And it was transformational when we started beating that goal. And I think the thing about it that was most transformational was this sense that we were in charge of our own destiny.
Twitch skyrocketed to heights that drew the attention from tech giants Google and Amazon. During this time, it was reported that Google made strides to acquire Twitch.
I think the reason why people are really interested in the company right now is that they're surprised when they hear that we have so many people, over 1 million people broadcast gaming every month.
But Twitch would grab the attention to its now parent company Amazon in an all-cash deal worth $970 million.
In the run-up to being acquired by Amazon, it was a crazy time at Twitch because we were growing really fast. Everything was breaking all the time because every system that we had put in place turned out not to be sufficiently scaled, and we were replacing every component of the system. We were adding people really fast because we had so much to go do, and we were starting to make money, and we were starting to get some real competitive attention from other players who were starting to think, oh, maybe this live streaming gaming thing is a thing. There's just so much going on, and it was a real relief when we finally finished the process. Twitch Prime has been massive for us, and we never could have done Twitch Prime without Amazon. The ability to let any Amazon Prime customer get benefits on Twitch and get benefits for our streamers by upselling people into buying an Amazon Prime subscription is just a great dynamic. It's great for our streamers, it's great for our viewers, it's great for us, good for Amazon.
But Google didn't miss out completely on the video game streaming scene. Just a year after Amazon acquired Twitch, YouTube Gaming was launched with a mix between live streaming and video on demand. Today, YouTube Gaming has a following of 82 million subscribers.
With YouTube, I'm capable of editing what I want to say, so it's a lot more controlled in what the content I want to put out. Whereas on Twitch, everything is just on the spot, live entertainment, you're just put in the spotlight. But that said, a lot of my YouTube content is just like VODs from my Twitch, just edited into a nice compact format.
The good thing about YouTube though is I can plan things ahead and I can get 4 or 5 videos ready to be uploaded, and I could go and take a vacation if I wanted to, or go on a trip and have those videos uploaded. But when it comes to Twitch, you have to be there every single day to keep the momentum going.
Even though YouTube is one of the top video websites in the world, it still hasn't drawn in as many eyeballs as Twitch when it comes to live streaming gaming.
I think Twitch is a little bit more mature, just because it's more focused on live streaming, and they've been doing live longer than anyone else. So the tools are more fully baked, they're more developed, there's more of them.
But YouTube gaming is making some serious strides to catch up with Twitch.
YouTube is close, so certainly I think they are Twitch's most important competitor today, and Twitch is more mature, more focused on live. YouTube has big advantages in other areas.
Since its beginnings, Twitch has evolved from its esports and gaming roots. It's now into professional sports. Back in 2018, Twitch announced it would be broadcasting Thursday Night Football games for the NFL.
In partnership with Amazon Prime, we have Thursday Night Football on Twitch. And that's awesome. It's been really cool, particularly to watch co-streaming of Thursday Night Football. This is something that we invented on Twitch to enable our streamers to help create the experience and to become effectively new commentators for football. The viewers have really liked it. Streamers have gotten super excited about it. We've gotten tons of outreach from streamers, other new streamers wanting to do it. And I think it's actually pointing the new way to do sports in a multiplayer entertainment context.
But it's not just the NFL taking notice of Twitch's value. Big brands are jumping onto the Twitch bandwagon. Brands have a number of different ways to integrate themselves on Twitch. Whether it's brand deals with streamers, ad space on the site, some brands even have their own Twitch channel.
When it comes down to it, Old Spice, they've done many things. I think they had a robotic squid that they partnered with some of the Twitch streamers to help push one of the most recent launches of the game. I think Overwatch just signed Coca-Cola to event-based sponsorship. And the brands that we see the most successful are the brands that either take on an event sponsorship or take on a streamer and really say, we're going to own this space.
But it's not just the big brands that are making money from Twitch. It's also the community of gamers too. There are over 3 million monthly broadcasters a month on the site, and 27,000 of them are Twitch partners. Twitch partners are streamers that can make money through paid subscriptions, bits, ads and sponsorships, and merchandising.
You can then donate bits to the person that you're watching, and those start at 1 bit all the way up to 1 million bits. And the way that works is, I think for every $1.40 you get 100 bits. And the streamer that you're then donating to, for instance, gets a portion of that revenue. The rest goes to Twitch.
Fans can pay $5 to $10 or even $25 a month to subscribe to a Twitch partner streamer. Twitch partners are streamers that have a sizable audience and stream either part or full-time.
And subscriptions are tiered, starting I think at the bottom is $4.99, to where you can subscribe to streamers who are your favorite, right? And that then, a portion of that stream money goes to Twitch, and a portion of that subscriber money goes to the streamer themselves.
And once it got to a point where it was sustainable and I could do Twitch full-time, pay the bills, that's when I really started creating and solidifying a schedule that was more your typical 8-hour work days, 5 to 6 days a week.
So what is it about Twitch that makes people tune in? With almost 1 billion hours of Twitch content watched by users in January of 2019, a majority of these live streams are dedicated to watching people play games like Fortnite, League of Legends, and Apex Legends. In fact, Fortnite was so big on Twitch, it had its own convention hall at Twitch's yearly expo called TwitchCon. But tuning into your favorite streamer and watching them play popular games isn't the only drive as to why people watch Twitch streamers. A lot of it has to do with the psychology behind Twitch.
So research conducted by Solblum et al. Found a number of reasons why Twitch is so popular. So the first reason they found was something called information seeking. So this is simply going to Twitch to watch someone play a video game who's very good at it, because they want to learn themselves how to be good at the game. Well, the second reason they identified was something called tension release. And this is the idea that someone may have had a difficult day at work, they may have had a hard day at school, so they get to come home, they get to put on a Twitch stream, and they get to be entertained by someone who is very entertaining themselves, while also playing a fun game.
Twitch is a site that has a community of users who aren't just tuning in, but are actively engaging with each other.
Someone donated to the streamer saying, I'm in a great mood, I'm going to pass on the love because I recently just got engaged. And everyone, the streamer and the audience watching you, they were all like, congratulations, I'm so happy for you, that's brilliant to hear. And when you dissect that, you think about the fact that this person got engaged, and their instinct may have been to tell their family, then to tell their friends, And now we're at a stage in Twitch where their next step was to tell their favourite streamer. And that's incredible to think about in terms of that social bond.
Back when Twitch first launched, it had over 3,000 Twitch partners on the site, 300,000 broadcasters each month, and 72 billion minutes watched. But in 2018, Twitch had 27,000 partners, 3.4 million broadcasters, and over 560 billion minutes watched. So what does the future of Twitch look like?
As competition heats up, I think we always try to do the same thing, which is go back to making sure you're nailing the basics. When you feel like there's a lot of competition around, the most important thing is to make sure you're nailing the very core needs and not spending too much of your time getting distracted by shiny new things you could build in the future, and that you pay attention to the core and you make sure you're paying attention to your customers and that they are getting the best possible service. Because every Twitch streamer has a choice where they go, and we're very grateful that they choose to stream on us, but we're also very aware that we're not the only people you can do it on. And I actually think that's healthy. I think it's good. I wouldn't want Twitch to be the only place you can stream live video. I don't think that would be good for our streamers, and I actually don't think it would be good for Twitch in the long run. I think you get lazy and sloppy when you don't have any competition. And I think I'm excited to see what competitors launch a lot of the time, because sometimes they innovate on things. I like to think we innovate the most.
So we also see increasing intersections between digital gaming and advertising in several ways, in advert games and also in-game advertisements, meaning game advertisements inside the game. So advert games are one form of this where we see brands creating a game based on their product or promotional purposes. And another way we see advertising is this in-game model where there's ads are integrated as billboards, logos, storefronts, etc. within the game, as you can see here on the bottom. There are numerous concerns that have been risen in society about gaming and its impacts on individuals and culture. One of these is gaming and addiction, because we know that gaming releases a certain amount of dopamine in the brain, which is the chemical that your brain feels in its reward center. And so this can be something that becomes really addictive for people. Additionally, some studies have associated gaming with increased incidences of depression, social phobias, and increased anxieties. These studies have also indicated that these concerns about addiction are likely to affect males more disproportionately than females. Games are often addictive by design with elaborate achievement schemes. So some argue that there should be much more strict regulation because of these negative potential impacts on people's psychological and emotional health. There's also a link to this short documentary in your module this week called Left Field, which gives you a little bit more information about this concept of social isolation and depression around gaming. Additional concerns linked to gaming are violence and misogyny. The question of violence, as you may remember, around media and youth has existed in pretty much every form of media that's ever been delivered to youth. We saw this in Penny Dreadfuls, but we see it exceptionally highly, of exceptional high social concern around video games. Most games involving combat are intentionally violent, and this has raised concerns over personality traits or certain types of players who are attracted to these games and what kinds of tendencies they can encourage people to develop. For example, in the 1999 Columbine High School massacre, the gunmen practiced their plan to execute members of their community at their school through a shooting-based video game. Additionally, misogyny and sexual harassment is also a major concern tied with gaming, as many popular games such as Grand Theft Auto position women in very sexualized ways and allow them to be the focus of violence, and this sort of spills out often into communication in multiplayer games. So the gaming industry has been largely shaped by men, and so many argue that implicit biases against women and misogynistic tendencies are inherent in the industry itself and the games that are produced by it. The issue of misogyny in gaming is the focus of the documentary GTFO that we'll be watching this week. If you're interested in writing about that, please do. It tells the story of sexual harassment of female gamers and programmers. There have been some attempts to address concerns about gaming, specifically through regulation. In the late 1970s, a game called Death Race spurred the first public outcry over violence in gaming and produced calls for games to be classified and rated based on their content. And this led to the establishment of the ESRB, otherwise known as the Entertainment Software Rating Board, which labels games based on their sexual and violence content, which allows them to be sold only to a specific age group. And you'll see here, so the first attempt at this was 1993. The next attempt of this was in 1993. The Senate held hearings regarding concerns about the effects of violent video games, especially on young people. The gaming industry implemented a self-regulation system. These don't necessarily line up particularly well, but they were designed to inform parents about sexual and violent content. And these were voluntarily constructed by the gaming industry as opposed to the ESRB. California law was proposed after ratings were implemented in 2010. California proposed to restrict the sale or rental of violent video games to minors and implemented fines for stores that didn't comply. In response to all of this fear and anxiety about the effects of video games, I wanted to introduce a short video, again linked in your module for this week, by Daphne Bavelier, trying to argue that despite all of these fears and anxieties, there's also a lot of potential good that comes out of gaming and game spaces for different kinds of mind frames. It's a great short little documentary as well, a TED Talk if you want to check that out as well. Much of the ownership in the gaming industry remains the same today in terms of those making devices as it has historically, but there has also been more diversity in game publishers in recent years. There are more independent companies and crowd-funded games getting developed. The game Invictus, for example, was an entirely crowd-funded game that became widely popular in mobile gaming. And this has provided an entry point for independent game developers and also for different kinds of developers. The cost of entry has decreased substantially with these different kinds of development potentials, but it still has its limits as time and money are still needed for game development, specifically a lot of time. So for instance, the gaming industry follows certain kinds of series of development stages that have remained consistent. So this involves designing, coding, scoring, testing the game, licensing, and then on the post-sale end, you see how this manifests into royalties to console manufacturers and issues related to intellectual property. The making of games often exceeds the development costs, right? So you can see here, this is the cost of a $60 game. It shows you where that cost is all going. As licensing and marketing costs in particular have risen, game developers are paying less for game development, so they're paying their developers less. At times, taking the free labor of gamers themselves to help with developing and testing games to cut costs, asking developers to do this work on spec is one of the ways that's called, instead of paying dedicated teams to do this. So there are also still many structural barriers to the involvement of women, people of color, and queer people and their interests and representations in video game making and the content that gets created on the other end. Increasingly, it seems as though trends in gaming technology are indicating that games will continue to become more immersive and more portable. We're also seeing a great deal of gamification, and gamification means the embedding of interactive game experiences into real life and into other kinds of processes and other forms of media, to bring competition and rewards into many other applications and technology. So we see this in workforce training technologies and applications. It's becoming more and more common in classrooms. Anyone who's had to sit through a class with an iClicker has some small experience of this. Social causes, fitness and health applications where you win points for, say, how many steps you get in a day or something like that. Practices like this are increasingly forms of gamification. Our book doesn't really get into this super deeply, but I did want to talk to you guys a little bit more about gamification and its relationship to forms of digital technology like blockchain and cryptocurrencies. and to look at some of the impacts of this kind of gamification. I'm going to do a short introduction to what blockchain is, how it connects to gamification, cryptocurrencies, and NFTs, and finally we'll look briefly at the material and labor impacts of that. Various industries are embracing gamification or the use of gaming and game design techniques to engage their users better. So instead of just providing coupons, for example, renewable points and discounts, businesses are now spicing up their marketing campaigns using cutting-edge technologies to realize engaging risk and reward mechanisms. And a lot of this is because of the expansion of blockchain and its power to create secure record keeping and enable transactions through cryptocurrencies. And this is what makes it suitable to gamification. Blockchain works like this. This is, forgive me because this is not my specialty, but we're going to get through this together. If you have data and you imagine that you put that data on a block and that block is then encrypted with a specific code, when you add a new block with that new data, the data is also encrypted based on the result of the previous block. What this means is that each block relies on the encryption of the block before it. What makes this important is that if you change something on one block, it will invalidate every block after it. So you can't hack into a single block alone and take the money, right? This isn't real money yet. This is still ledgers. It's a record of money. But you can't hack it, right? So people are really invested in blockchains because of its security, because of its publicness, and because it doesn't belong to any particular bank or other institution. So it's extremely secure and known as a write-only script. So it can't be altered the way that other forms of currency can be in ledgers, say of banks, for instance. So in the process of gamification, rewards from certain games and gamified campaigns will create virtual assets. Starbucks, for instance, has recently run a promotional gamified reward system where the more you spend at Starbucks, the greater your rewards get. And the way they keep track of that is through a blockchain. So for video games, items can be acquired by successfully finishing assignments or by conquering rivals. And these digital items can then be made accessible to a participant or tied to a particular account. And so it becomes a kind of ownership. And this then moves us into cryptocurrency, because often these points get then translated into applicable currency in the world. Okay, so cryptocurrency is when the data on the block is a ledger of money. That means that it's a record of who is owed what. The cryptocurrency itself is not the money, it is a marker of money, a marker of value in other places. There are numerous kinds of cryptocurrency. There's Dogecoin, there's Bitcoin, there's Stellar, Ripple. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. Dogecoin was a cryptocurrency that was created as a joke by software engineers, but nonetheless, I think there's about $29 billion worth of Dogecoin available at the moment in the world. And so then the next step from cryptocurrencies and Bitcoins and Dogecoins is something called Ethereum and NFTs. And so what that is when the data on the blockchain is not merely a record or a ledger of a financial obligation. It is instead a smart contract. It is an automatically generated contract. So it automatically executes a contract rather than just recording financial information. So it allows for exchanges, like a digital vending machine. You put in some kind of coin and you get something in return. So basically a button is pushed and enough cryptocurrency is available, then an automatic contract is executed and a purchase is made and ownership is triggered. Now, what marks an NFT as unique? What NFT stands for is non-fungible tokens. So these are tokens of unique value, unlike traditional or even cryptocurrencies, which can be divided up and used to purchase other things. So a single dollar, if I have $1, that can be broken up into 4 quarters, and it can be used to purchase anything. An NFT is unique and can't be broken up and can't be used to purchase something else. It could be traded for money that can be broken up, but it itself cannot be. It has unique value. We see the rise of NFTs in the last several years, primarily around things like digital media. This image that you see here, this one right here, is a collection of an artist's whole work, and this is an NFT that I think was purchased for some insane number of millions of dollars. I can't recall. But what that means is that the person, they don't own the rights to those images. Those images can still be printed in other places, but they have this non-fungible ownership of this sort of containment of these things together. It is a record. It is a token that they own of this representation. I know this is, for me, it's tricky to wrap my head around. It might make more sense to you guys because it's part of the world that you're all growing up in, but for me, it's still hard to wrap my head around. So forgive me if I'm explaining things you already know. Okay, the next thing to think about in all of this is the fact that this has very real ramifications, right? So if you think about what blockchain is, it's a collection of data that needs to be kept in servers. So that means that there's an incredible amount of physical space and physical resources that are mined, not to mention an enormous amount of energy that's used to keep these things constantly running so that these records stay active 24/7, 365 days a year, into eternity, presumably, right? And related to this is also something called Bitcoin mining, which is the process by which new Bitcoins are entered into circulation, and it's also the way that new transactions are confirmed by the network. And it's a critical component of the maintenance and development of a blockchain ledger. We see how this goes, right? One thing I wanted us to think about that our book, I think, curiously doesn't really ask us to address that much is what are the impacts of digital commerce and blockchains and this process of gamification? How and why is cryptocurrency mined is an important conversation, and we see here, this is a representation here on the bottom of a small town in Iceland that has become central to cryptocurrency mining, and I sent you guys an article to read for this week looking at what the impacts of this are. To the left of this, we also see people who are what are called gold farmers, people who specifically play video games for the purposes of earning points within these systems of blockchains for other gamers to use so that they can advance through games without having to devote that many hours to play. So that's an interesting representation of the way real currency and cryptocurrency and value within a blockchain system move back and forth. I hope you guys find that article really interesting. I know that I do, and I think that this is going to be one of the major concerns for your generation to think about is what this looks like when we have these sorts of massive spaces where data has to be kept and cooled because these massive spaces of server storage get very hot. And we tend to imagine, and we're encouraged to imagine, data as existing in kind of this ethereal way, things are on a cloud, when in reality, this is a deeply material reality that involves physical alterations to the climate, to the environment, in order for us to gain the materials and the energy needed to produce these things. Finally, I didn't really get into it for this lecture so much, but I'm going to include a short video for you all to check out about one of the ways that gamification has also altered the stock market, people who have decided to treat the stock market as a game space. And we saw this play out with the GameStop scandal. It's not really, anyway, when a number of people decided collectively because of their communications on social media to try to save GameStop, specifically a former game selling store that still exists, but one that was starting to go the way of Blockbuster because we mostly buy our games online these days. And people sunk a bunch of resources into it on the stock market, raised its value really quickly, and a lot of this happened through cryptocurrency and blockchain purchases of stock. I included a video on that for you guys as well. We have a really exciting week of mass media mini lectures where lots of people are going to be telling us things that I probably don't even fully understand and wasn't able to explain to you very well here. So Eric is going to teach us a little bit about ARPs. We're going to hear more about NFTs and I think a couple of other things. I hope that you find that all interesting this week. And that's all for this week. Be sure to read Chapter 3 and the article and check out the videos that are linked here for you this week and listen to the 2 podcasts. Also, make sure you watch your classmates' really excellent mass media mini lectures that'll be posted. And the writing option for this week is on the documentary GTFO. And I hope that this was a good week for you guys. Take care, everybody.